most painful truth, the one no one dares to face, is that most people don't live. They just react. They don't decide. They just respond to noise, to routine, to pressure, to other people's expectations. They breathe, they move, they play their roles, but they never wake up. They spend years, even decades, believing they're living, when in reality they're just following a script they never wrote. And the most tragic part is that they convince themselves this automatic life is normal. They never question whether they could see the world through new eyes, whether their mind could serve a deeper purpose than merely surviving the day. They live asleep, convinced they're awake, while life slips through their fingers without ever revealing its real meaning. And maybe, though it hurts to admit it, this is happening to you, because no one ever explained life to you honestly. No one taught you to think for yourself, to look beyond appearances, to question the rules, to observe how your mind actually works. No one told you that life isn't understood by looking outward, but inward. That what matters most isn't what happens to you, but how you interpret it. That your mind can free you, but it can also imprison you. That what you call reality is just an unexamined story you've been repeating since childhood. No one taught you the essential truth. Awakening is a choice. And every day you don't make that choice, you remain trapped in a world you didn't choose. Let me promise you something, this episode isn't cheap motivation. I'm not here to tell you what you want to hear, but what no one ever told you. Life, when you see it consciously, isn't a mystery. It's a structure, a pattern, a web of causes and effects you can observe, understand, and use to your advantage. But to do that, you need one thing: to open your eyes. Not to the big things, but to the small ones, the ones that reveal everything once you learn how to see. The thoughts that rule you, the emotions that drag you, the expectations that disappoint you, the decisions you make without knowing why. To open your eyes is to stop being a character and become the author. Let me ask you an uncomfortable but necessary question. When was the last time you thought something that was truly yours? Not what your family told you, not what you saw online, not what the world has been repeating for centuries. Something truly your own. Most people never make that distinction. They confuse thinking with repeating. They confuse mental habit with identity. They confuse what they've learned with what's true. And so they spend their entire lives living under codes they never chose. Huxley said it without sugarcoating it. People don't want freedom. They want comfort. And mental comfort is the most dangerous kind, because it makes you believe you understand something you've never even looked at. This episode is both an invitation and a warning. If you decide to continue, you'll begin to understand life in a way that might not let you go back. Because once you see the truth, once you see who you really are and what you're really doing with your mind, you can never live the same way again. You start noticing the trap of comfort. You begin to see how your mind tries to protect you from what would actually help you grow. You start realizing that life doesn't limit you. You limit yourself by interpreting everything through fear or habit. You begin to see that life isn't complicated. You complicate it with unrealistic expectations, repetitive thoughts, and distorted interpretations. If you keep listening, you'll see life as no one has ever shown it to you. You'll see that what you call reality is a mental construction. You'll see that suffering comes more from resistance than from the event itself. You'll see that freedom isn't doing whatever you want, but freeing yourself from what you fear. You'll see that pain isn't punishment. It's a message. You'll see that silence is deeper than any answer. You'll see that the present is the only place real life exists and everything else is an illusion. You'll see that the mind, when you don't understand it, can destroy you, but when you do, it becomes your greatest tool. This episode doesn't aim to please you, it aims to wake you up, to make you doubt everything you've always believed, to make you uncomfortable enough for something in you to break, so something new can be built. Because life doesn't change when the world changes. It changes when you change the way you see it. And no one ever told you this, because society isn't designed for you to think, it's designed for you to keep functioning, to consume, to obey, to repeat. But you're here because something inside you no longer wants to stay asleep. Something inside you wants to understand, to see, to awaken. So open your eyes, literally. Because what's coming next isn't a manual, it isn't a guide, it isn't a recipe. It's the 12 lessons you should have learned before anything else. The 12 truths that reveal how life really works when you dare to see it without filters. The 12 cracks where the light enters once the mind stops repeating the same old story. If you're ready, we begin. Because life is never the same once you learn to see it consciously. Before we begin, declare your commitment in the comments. From today on, I won't let my mind control me without questioning it. That phrase will be your reminder that you're here to wake up, not to keep living on autopilot. This is your moment to prove to yourself that you deserve clarity, awareness, and inner mastery. Without further delay, let's begin. First Stoic lesson. Awareness awakens to comfort as a trap. Most people call a peaceful life what is actually a numbed one. They believe being comfortable means being well, that avoiding effort is a sign of intelligence, that dodging pain is the same as balance. But if you look with brutal honesty, you'll realize something unsettling. Prolonged comfort isn't peace, it's weakening. It's the invisible space where willpower, clarity, and inner strength quietly die. Huxley warned about this coldly. Comfort without depth leads to insignificance. And the Stoics had described the same phenomenon centuries earlier. When you don't question your life, your mind becomes the perfect stage where your passions rule without resistance. Comfort is seductive precisely because it demands nothing from you. It doesn't ask for reflection, it doesn't require courage, it doesn't demand growth. It's a soft, warm, familiar place. But it's also a place where nothing evolves. If it's never occurred to you that comfort is a form of numbness, just watch how your mind behaves when it's not challenged. It scatters, becomes lazy, avoids decisions, clings to excuses, seeks easy, distractions, runs from silence, procrastinates, fantasizes about easier paths. A mind without resistance becomes its own enemy. The Stoics taught that virtue is born in the confrontation with discomfort, not because pain is good in itself, but because discomfort reveals what comfort hides. Your weakness, your fears, your irrational desires, your emotional dependencies, your unconscious priorities. Pain, when faced with awareness, is a mirror that unsettles you but tells the truth. And that's exactly why so many prefer to live unexamined lives, because they fear seeing what they truly are. Marcus Aurelius said, "The life of a man is what his thoughts make of it." But thoughts don't change when everything is easy. They change when something forces you to observe them. Awareness awakens when you realize that prolonged comfort isn't a refuge, but a trap built by your own mind to keep you from exploring what could elevate you. It's a golden cage that locks from the inside. Think about it. The decisions that transformed your life most likely came from pain, not calm. The deepest truths you discovered were born out of crisis, not pleasant moments. The bonds that shaped you most were forged in vulnerability, not comfort. And the greatest growth in your character didn't appear when life was smooth, but when you had to face what overwhelmed you. So why do we keep treating comfort as the ultimate ideal of existence when it's precisely the state where we grow the least? Huxley believed intellectual comfort was a form of voluntary blindness. The comfortable person doesn't want to see beyond the obvious, not because they can't, but because looking deeper would require them to give up their illusions. Stoicism agrees. To live without questioning is the most sophisticated form of slavery. Because when you don't examine your mind rules you. When you don't observe your desires govern you. When you don't understand your emotions drag you. Comfort isn't rest, it's blind obedience. Those who live in comfort avoid discomfort, not because it's unbearable, but because discomfort shows them everything they don't want to admit: their fragility, their lack of discipline, their inability to stand on their own, their absence of purpose. So, to avoid seeing those shadows, they seek distraction: social media, food, entertainment, noise. They drown in stimuli to avoid hearing what their mind would say if they were silent. But life doesn't transform in noise, it transforms in the stillness that noise tries to hide. The Stoics never promoted deliberate suffering, but they defended the act of facing the inevitable without running, because they knew the quality of a mind is measured by what it can endure. If you can only live well when everything is easy, you're not free, you're dependent. Comfort becomes a soft, invisible drug that makes you believe you're fine, while it slowly weakens you. The comfortable person loses tolerance for frustration, for criticism, for delay, for silence, for solitude. They lose the ability to stand firm before real life. And what happens when life inevitably hits? Because life hits. It hits with loss, with change, with disappointment, with uncertainty. The person who has lived anesthetized breaks when pushed out of comfort. Their mind collapses because it was never trained. Their emotions consume them because they were never understood. Their will disappears because it was never exercised. Comfort builds a fragile mind, and a fragile mind suffers even from things that aren't painful in themselves, but from the exaggerated story it creates. In contrast, those who awaken to awareness, who understand that comfort is a trap, begin to see life as a training ground, not a battlefield, but a field for growth. Not a place to escape pain, but to learn from it. Not a place to avoid challenges, but to discover who they are through them. The wise person consciously exposes themselves to discomfort to become stronger than it. And when real suffering appears, they don't collapse, they expand. The awakening of awareness begins the very moment you stop seeing comfort as your ally and start seeing it for what it truly is: a barrier between you and your highest potential. Discomfort, when faced with calm, doesn't destroy you. It refines you. It reveals you. It wakes you up. And there is no awakening without pain, because awakening is precisely the act of breaking the illusions your mind used to keep you asleep. Life will make you uncomfortable, whether you like it or not. The question is, will that discomfort find you asleep or awake? Because those who are asleep break, those who are awake transform. And once awareness awakens, it rarely goes back to sleep. Second Stoic lesson: critical thinking is the first step toward wisdom. Most people don't think, they repeat. They adopt inherited ideas, socialized beliefs, borrowed opinions, second-hand convictions. They live inside mental structures they never built, yet defend them with the passion of someone who believes they possess the truth. Critical thinking is rare because it demands courage, not physical courage, but intellectual courage. The courage to question even what gave you your sense of identity, to examine what you've believed your entire life, to say, with humility but without fear, "What if I'm wrong?" Huxley understood this. The world doesn't fear strong people, it fears people who think. And the Stoics, centuries earlier, had realized that virtue doesn't arise from obedience, but from the constant examination of oneself. To think critically doesn't mean distrusting everything, nor rejecting for the sake of rejection, nor adopting a cynical view of existence. It means looking at things clearly, without the emotional fog that distorts reality. It means using reason as a lighthouse to illuminate what you feel, what you desire, what you fear. Because the human mind, if left unobserved, deceives itself easily. In fact, self-deception is the most common form of suffering. We suffer not from what we see, but from what we imagine. And only critical thinking separates imagination from fact, interpretation from event, emotion from truth. Huxley urged people to think for themselves rather than follow the current. But thinking for yourself requires courage, because it means taking full responsibility for your worldview. When you adopt ideas without examining them, the responsibility belongs to others. When you think for yourself, you can no longer blame anyone else. That is the price of intellectual freedom, and also the doorway to inner peace, because the mind that thinks clearly stops seeing itself as a victim of the world and begins to understand it from within. It stops acting on impulse and starts acting on conviction. It stops fearing the unknown because it learns to observe before reacting. The Stoics taught that reason is the faculty that distinguishes humans from animals, not reason as a weapon to win arguments, but as a tool for self-governance. To them, a life without reflection was a life without a master. And they weren't exaggerating. If you don't question your beliefs rule you. If you don't examine your thoughts drag you. If you don't observe your emotions manipulate you. Wisdom doesn't begin when you know a lot. It begins when you start asking, is this really so? That simple question is dynamite. It can bring down entire castles of illusion. Think about it for a moment. How many times have you defended something you never even analyzed? How many times did you believe something was true just because it was repeated to you often enough? How many times were you afraid to think differently for fear of losing belonging, approval, or identity? That's how most people live, not with intellectual freedom, but with intellectual fear. Fear of having their own ideas. Fear of contradicting the established order. Fear of standing apart from the group. Fear of questioning what has always been taken for granted. Critical thinking means walking through that fear to find a truth deeper than the comfort of consensus. Huxley knew society doesn't want individuals who think, it wants individuals who function. The social machinery doesn't need deep minds, it needs obedient ones. The system rewards conformity. Schools reward memorization, not reflection. Social media rewards reaction, not analysis. Culture rewards the repetition of pleasant phrases, not genuine understanding. That's why thinking is a revolutionary act, even if you never raise your voice. Because the true revolution begins when you stop reacting and start choosing, when you stop repeating what you hear and start examining it, when you stop believing out of habit and start understanding through observation. The Stoics insisted on distinguishing between what you see and what you interpret, between fact and judgment, between event and opinion. That distinction is the root of critical thinking. It's not about denying emotion, but about recognizing it without letting it distort reality. The wise person feels, but is not swept away. They observe emotion like a cloud passing through the sky. They see it, acknowledge it, but don't confuse it with the sky itself. Thoughts, too, must be observed that way, not as absolute truths, but as hypotheses to be tested before obeying. Critical thinking doesn't make you cold, it makes you free. It allows you to feel without being enslaved by what you feel. It allows you to listen without adopting what you hear. It allows you to see without absorbing everything you look at. It allows you to stay clear, even in chaos. The wise don't drift with the emotional current of the moment. They stop, observe, question, filter, and choose. That inner process is the essence of wisdom and the foundation of a life well lived. Huxley and the Stoics shared one central truth. A mind that never questions is a mind easily manipulated. It can be controlled by fear, by desire, by society, by culture, by family history, by the past, by the dopamine of social media, by the need to belong. The only way to avoid that fate is to think, to truly think. To think without hurry, to think without fear, to think even when thinking hurts, because thinking hurts. It hurts to see your contradictions. It hurts to admit you were wrong. It hurts to realize you lived for years with ideas that weren't your own. It hurts to question the narrative that once gave you identity. But that pain is transformative. It's not the pain that destroys, it's the pain that cleanses, the pain of growth, the pain that precedes freedom. When you begin to think critically, you start to see patterns where before there was only confusion. You begin to distinguish your thoughts from the ones you inherited. You begin to notice how fear distorts your judgment. You begin to hear the voice of your reason more clearly than the noise of the world. You begin to build a vision that's yours, and that vision gives you something no one can take away: discernment. Without discernment, you're vulnerable. With it, you're invincible. Critical thinking is the first step toward wisdom because it hands you the key to your own mind. And whoever owns their mind owns their life. Third Stoic lesson: meaning is not found outside, it is discovered within. There is a silent, persistent, and devastating lie passed from generation to generation. The idea that the meaning of your life lies outside of you, in what you do, in what you achieve, in what you own, in how others see you, in who loves you, in how much you earn, in how much approval you receive. That lie takes root so early that almost no one questions it. Everyone runs outward searching for something that can only be found within. And the more they run, the emptier they feel. The more they accumulate, the more dissatisfied they become. The more they search, the further they drift from what they are truly searching for. Huxley observed it with haunting clarity. Most men live in a permanent dissociation between what they seek and what they need. The Stoics, thousands of years earlier, had already warned that the human being loses himself the moment he believes fulfillment depends on the external world. The truth no one wants to face is this: nothing external can give you meaning because nothing external truly belongs to you. Everything outside is borrowed. Today you have it, tomorrow you don't. Today they applaud you, tomorrow they ignore you. Today you are loved, tomorrow you are forgotten. Today you succeed, tomorrow things change. Building your life on external things is like building a house on sand. It shifts, it sinks, it collapses. That emotional fragility is the direct consequence of living outward. Meaning is born only when you turn your gaze inward, when you stop seeking significance on the surface of the world and begin exploring the depth of your own mind. The Stoics said that peace doesn't lie in circumstances but in interpretation, not in life itself, but in what you do with it. And this isn't some cheap consolation, it's a philosophical truth of weight. Reality has no meaning on its own. You are the one who gives it meaning. One person can have everything and still feel lost. Another can have very little and feel complete. It's not the situation that defines life, it's the awareness that interprets it. Huxley expressed it as a psychological fact. What we experience is not the world itself, but our way of perceiving it. And that way of perceiving is what shapes your entire existence. But there is a monumental obstacle to discovering inner meaning: mental noise. The untrained mind scatters into expectations, comparisons, borrowed desires, insecurities, cultural narratives, and superficial illusions. It's a theater where every thought plays a role, and without realizing it, you identify with the character on stage. To live outwardly is to live trapped in that theater, to believe that yourself is what you do, what you show, what others see. It's to forget that what is essential does not depend on an audience. Huxley believed that external searching without an inner foundation is empty because most people don't even know what they're looking for. They confuse pleasure with meaning, stimulation with purpose, activity with significance. And the Stoics agreed. Human beings suffer not because life lacks meaning, but because they look for it where it cannot be found. Marcus Aurelius summed it up in a sentence that should be tattooed in the mind: life is opinion. And if your opinion of yourself is based on the external, you will never discover the real meaning of your existence. Meaning appears when you begin to observe who you are without your decorations, without your achievements, without your labels, without the story you built to fit in, without the character you invented to survive. When you dare to look at what remains once everything that defined your identity is stripped away, the question changes. It's no longer, what do I need to feel fulfilled? But who am I when I need nothing? That question destroys illusions and opens doors. It forces you to abandon the childish idea that you must have something to be someone, and confronts you with the mature truth that meaning is a state, not a result. But discovering inner meaning isn't an intellectual act, it's a process of shedding. You must strip yourself of narratives, expectations, conditionings, and desires that were never truly yours. You must be left alone with your consciousness, even if it's uncomfortable. You must listen to silence, even if it frightens you. You must accept that within you lies a depth that doesn't depend on the world's noise. Meaning arises when you become capable of inhabiting that depth without needing to escape from it. The Stoics taught that virtue is the foundation of meaning, not virtue as rigid morality, but as inner coherence, that your thoughts align with your values, that your decisions reflect your character, that your way of living mirrors your true essence. When there is coherence, meaning appears. When there is contradiction, anguish appears. Existential anguish isn't a philosophical mystery. It's the natural result of living far from yourself, of betraying what you know you are in pursuit of what you think you should be. Huxley said, "Man does not know himself because he fears what he would discover." And he was right. To discover real meaning is to face your shadows. It means admitting that your choices have often been guided by fear rather than conviction. It means realizing that the emptiness you feel isn't the absence of something external, but the absence of inner connection. Yet that very emptiness is the doorway, the call, the evidence that you're ready to search deeper. If you didn't feel the emptiness, you would never look for the real meaning. And here lies the deepest paradox. When you seek meaning outside, you lose yourself. When you seek it within, you find it outside as well, because the outer world transforms when your inner world aligns. What once felt unbearable becomes tolerable. What once attracted you for its superficiality loses its charm. What once hurt you no longer reaches you, and what you once couldn't see reveals itself. The outer world becomes a reflection of your inner clarity. That's why the Stoics insisted that inner mastery is the foundation of outer mastery. Life will not give you meaning. People won't give it to you. Success won't give it to you. Approval won't give it to you. The external can accompany, enhance, and inspire, but it can never fulfill. Meaning is internal work, silent, deep, and intimate. A dialogue with yourself that no one else can have for you. And when you find it, you don't need to announce it. It's evident in how you move through the world. Meaning is not found outside, it is discovered within. And when you discover it, everything changes, not because the world changes, but because you finally learned how to see. Fourth Stoic lesson. Pain and adversity reveal what comfort hides. Most people run from pain as if it were an absolute threat, a ruthless enemy to be avoided at all costs. But that automatic, almost instinctive reaction is precisely what keeps so many trapped in emotional shallowness. If you look closely, pain doesn't destroy on its own. It destroys resistance, denial, and the illusion that life should be easy. Huxley understood this. Challenge is not punishment, it is revelation. The Stoics said it differently, but meant the same thing. Suffering, when faced directly, illuminates corners of your character that comfort could never show you. Pain is uncomfortable because it forces you to look at what you normally avoid. It leaves you defenseless, unmasked, stripped of the narratives you use to justify your choices. It shows you what truly matters to you, not what you claim matters. It reveals your deepest fears, your most hidden desires, your strongest attachments. And, above all, it shows you something comfort works hard to conceal: your capacity, because you don't know how much you can endure until life forces you to endure. You don't know how strong you are until life demands your strength. And you don't know who you really are until you go through moments that shake everything you thought was certain. Huxley said that the mind awakens when reality shatters fantasy. And that's exactly what adversity does. It breaks the stories you told yourself to feel safe. It breaks the comfortable explanations you used to justify your choices. It breaks the illusions that kept you from inner work. Pain is honest. It doesn't lie. It doesn't sugarcoat. It doesn't disguise. It shows you the cracks in your life with a clarity that hurts but also frees, because you can't change what you can't see. And pain, when accepted, illuminates. The Stoics never sought suffering, but they never rejected it either. They saw it as a severe but fair teacher. Epictetus said that trials reveal whether your training was real. Being strong when life is easy says nothing about you. Being strong when life overwhelms you, that is the true testament of character. For the Stoic, adversity is not tragedy, it's transformation. Not in the romantic sense that everything happens for a reason, but in the deeper sense that everything that hurts you has the potential to refine you if you face it with awareness. Think about how most people respond to pain. They avoid it, they numb it, They ignore it. They hide it. They justify it with stories that keep them from facing it. But pain doesn't disappear just because you bury it. It hides in your thoughts, in your habits, in your automatic reactions. It becomes mental noise, chronic tension, fear disguised as caution. When you don't face your pain rules you. Comfort might look like a refuge, but it becomes a prison the moment real adversity arrives. Huxley spoke of self-deception as the greatest form of slavery. And excessive comfort is the perfect self-deception. It makes you believe you're fine, that nothing needs to change, that you can live without ever looking inward. But when pain comes, that illusion collapses. Pain forces you to stop, to question, to reassess your priorities. It forces you to ask what's truly worth your time and what isn't. It forces you to admit that you've been asleep in parts of your life that required urgent attention. In that sense, pain is not the enemy, it's the messenger of truth. The Stoics knew that what hurts most is rarely the event itself, but the judgment you attach to it. Physical pain is sharp, interpretive pain is infinite. External adversity may be harsh, but inner adversity can be devastating if left unguarded. That's why Marcus Aurelius repeated again and again, everything that happens is either tolerable or transformable. He wasn't denying life's harshness, he was affirming the human ability to reinterpret it. Pain reveals your power when you face it without fleeing from yourself. Adversity also reveals your relationships. When everything is fine, anyone can stand beside you. But when life turns difficult, very few remain. Pain shows you who walks with you out of convenience and who stays out of conviction, who understands you in silence and who demands that you fake strength, who can hold your fragility and who only wants your smile. It's in darkness, not under the artificial light of social comfort, where you truly see. But the deepest revelation of pain is internal. It shows you the truth about your own identity. It shows you what you're made of. It shows you which beliefs sustain you and which sabotage you. It shows whether your spirituality is genuine or just ornamental. It shows whether your discipline is real or only practiced when things are easy. It shows whether your calm is authentic or merely the absence of problems. Comfort reveals nothing. Pain reveals everything. Huxley insisted that to awaken, a person must walk through the discomfort of questioning everything, and the Stoics affirmed that discomfort, properly faced, is the most fertile ground for virtue. Not because suffering is noble, but because real life includes pain, loss, uncertainty, and unexpected change. To try to avoid it is to try to avoid life itself. Wisdom is living in such a way that neither comfort dulls you nor adversity destroys you. When you allow yourself to experience pain without resisting, without dramatizing, without turning it into an eternal story, something remarkable happens. You find clarity. A clarity not born of thought, but of presence. Pain forces your ego's defenses to fall away, and in that vulnerability, a lucidity appears that comfort never brings. Adversity is a bridge toward a version of yourself that is more honest, more conscious, more resilient. And when you cross it, you begin to understand a truth that changes lives. Pain didn't define you, how you faced it did. The wise do not take pride in feeling no pain. They take pride in not running from it. Because whoever runs from pain runs from themselves. And whoever walks through it with awareness discovers a strength they never imagined they possessed. Pain and adversity reveal what comfort hides. And once you see what was underneath, you can never fall asleep again. Fifth Stoic lesson: freedom lies in not depending on external stimuli. Most people believe they're free, but they're not. Not because someone is oppressing them from the outside, but because they've handed their peace over to everything they can't control. They live dependent on stimuli. Messages, approval, notifications, validation, praise, distractions, purchases, noise, company. They feel good when something external gives them that feeling, and bad when it disappears. Modern society, as Huxley warned, doesn't control us through tyranny, but through entertainment, distraction, and instant gratification. It keeps us busy so we never stop to ask whether we truly own our lives. And the Stoics had already discovered this essential truth. Anyone who depends on external things to feel fulfilled is condemned to emotional slavery. Huxley saw this phenomenon as a form of collective numbness, people who never develop inner autonomy because there's always a stimulus to distract them from their emptiness. A mind dependent on stimuli is a mind that cannot be alone with itself. It's a restless mind that needs noise to avoid hearing what's inside. A mind that flees silence because silence confronts it, and what you refuse to confront ends up ruling you. The Stoics knew that emotional dependence on the external world is the root of suffering, not because the external is evil, but because the external is fragile. Everything changes, everything moves, everything fades. To depend on the external for stability is like trying to stand on water. You can stay afloat for a while, but you can't build a life there. Whoever anchors their well-being to external things, people, success, image, others' reactions, is always one thought away from anxiety, and in that volatility, nothing endures. That's why the Stoics sought their center within themselves. Because what is internal, once trained, becomes solid. Inner freedom begins when you understand this phrase. If something external can disturb your peace, you are not free. It doesn't matter if it's criticism, rejection, absence, a comment, failure, someone else's mood, or a missed notification. If your state depends on it, you've lost control. Today's society is designed to make you lose that control daily. It offers endless, instant, constant stimuli. It turns you into an addict to easy dopamine. It trains you to feel good with what requires no effort, a reaction, a message, a purchase, a distraction. But that emotional comfort is a double-edged sword. It makes you feel good for a few seconds, while weakening you within. Huxley described this system as a form of voluntary slavery. There's no need to oppress humanity when humanity becomes dependent on immediate pleasure. And the Stoics taught the same from another angle. Freedom is not doing what you want, it's not being a slave to your impulses. The wise don't reject pleasure. They simply don't let pleasure rule them. They enjoy the external, but don't depend on it. They use it, but don't idolize it. They appreciate it, but don't cling to it. Think for a moment about how often you've let something external ruin your day. A phrase, a gesture, a message that never came, a result that didn't go your way, a plan that fell apart, an opinion you disagreed with, a look you took as rejection, a comment that bruised your ego, an unexpected setback you couldn't control. That's how fragile most people's emotional freedom is. That's how easily their peace can be disturbed. The Stoics trained their minds not to be vulnerable to the external, not because they were cold, but because they wanted to live without depending on chance. They wanted to master their temperament even in unfavorable circumstances. For Marcus Aurelius, freedom was the ability to say, "This does not depend on me, therefore it cannot trouble me." When integrated, that phrase becomes a shield that doesn't separate you from life, but from unnecessary emotional chaos. Huxley saw modern humanity trapped in distraction because distraction prevents introspection. And without introspection, there can be no freedom. You can't be free if you don't know yourself. You can't be free if you don't understand why you feel what you feel, why you react how you react, why you crave so much external stimulation. Emotional dependence almost always arises from the inability to be with yourself. Whoever doesn't know their inner world looks outside for a lifeline that doesn't exist. The challenge is not to eliminate the external, but to stop needing it to feel whole. This requires deep training. Learning to enjoy without clinging, to lose without collapsing, to receive without becoming dependent, to live without needing the world to confirm your worth. The wise don't flee the world, they simply refuse to let it rule them. For the Stoics, freedom was an act of inner sovereignty, the ability to choose your response regardless of what happens outside. You can't choose events, but you can choose your stance. And in that choice lies your true autonomy. When you master this, when your composure no longer collapses over external things, you discover a strength that will follow you anywhere. But this lesson goes even deeper. It's not just about resisting external stimuli, it's about recognizing the part of you that craves them. Why does criticism hurt? Because your identity depends on being seen as right. Why does rejection sting? Because you believe your worth depends on being chosen. Why does a comment unsettle you? Because your ego is built on others' opinions. Why do you crave constant distraction? Because silence reveals a truth you're not yet ready to face. Freedom begins when you stop covering your emptiness with stimuli and start listening to it. Huxley and the Stoics agreed on this. A mind that depends on the external will never be free, no matter how much it appears to be. And a mind that finds its center within becomes unbreakable even in a chaotic world. True freedom doesn't feel like rebellion. It feels like lightness. It's an inner state where nothing outside can steal your clarity. Freedom lies in not depending on external stimuli, not because the external is bad, but because you are far too valuable to be controlled by anything that isn't within you. Sixth Stoic lesson: what you don't observe controls you. The human mind has a disturbing trait. It operates in silence. It works without asking permission, without announcing its intentions, without justifying its movements. It thinks for you, interprets for you, decides for you long before you notice. And most people live like this, ruled by thoughts they've never examined, emotions they've never understood, and beliefs they've never questioned. Huxley described this state as living within an invisible mental universe, an inner world that shapes every action, yet almost no one stops to explore it. The Stoics, centuries earlier, had explained it with brutal precision. What you don't observe controls you. What you observe transforms. The mind isn't dangerous because of what it contains, but because of what it contains unseen. An unexamined thought becomes a belief. An unchallenged belief becomes a rule. An unchecked rule becomes a prison. And a prison you can't see is a prison you can't escape. What dominates you is not what you know, it's what you ignore. What limits you is not what you feel, it's what you're afraid to feel. What sabotages you is not your mind, it's your lack of attention to it. Huxley said that most human suffering comes from unconsciousness, not from real pain, but from misunderstood pain, not from real fear, but from unobserved fear, not from life itself, but from the automatic interpretation we make of it without realizing. and the Stoics said exactly the same. Human suffering doesn't come from things, but from the opinions we hold about them. Yet those opinions, if never observed, act as inner laws, laws you didn't consciously write but still obey without knowing. Observation is the first form of freedom, because watching your mind changes its power over you. When you observe fear, fear loses authority. When you observe an impulse, the impulse loses strength. When you observe a thought, that thought stops posing as truth. Observation breaks the illusion that mental activity is absolute. It reveals it for what it is, a passing phenomenon, not a sentence. But observation isn't easy, because it forces you to face what you've been avoiding for years. It makes you look at your insecurity without excuses. It makes you see your repetitive patterns without justification. It forces you to acknowledge your wounds without softening them. It compels you to confront your deepest desires without shame. The discomfort of looking inward is why so many choose distraction instead. Huxley said that man fears silence because in silence he hears his truth. And truth without filters can be unbearable when you're not ready to see it. That's why modern society is built to avoid introspection. Screens, noise, hurry, constant stimulation, compulsive busyness. It's not just about consumption, it's about escape. Escape from oneself. Because no one wants to see what controls them. The Stoic, however, chooses to look. He chooses to pause. He chooses to observe his thoughts as proposals, not orders. He chooses to examine his emotions without identifying with them. He chooses to listen to his inner dialogue without surrendering to it. He asks himself questions that most never dare to ask. Is this thought truly mine or inherited? Is this emotion real or an echo of my past? Does this reaction represent me or control me? Does this fear protect my life or limit it? Constant observation breaks automatism, and human life is full of automatism. You respond without choosing. You react without understanding. You get angry without asking why. You withdraw without seeing what you're afraid to lose. You desire without knowing where the desire was born. You criticize without recognizing what part of you you're criticizing. You love from unhealed wounds. You seek approval without seeing the emptiness, asking for it. You run without seeing what shadow chases you. All of this happens in the mental shadow. And everything that stays in the shadow controls your behavior. The Stoics spoke of the hegemonikon, the rational part of the soul responsible for governing impulses. But it cannot rule what it does not know. That's why Epictetus repeated that inner vigilance is a daily discipline, not an occasional exercise, not a romantic spiritual practice, a duty. Examine everything, he said. Accept nothing without scrutiny. Because the most dangerous enemy is the one that operates within. Huxley believed that human beings live imprisoned by their own mental constructions. But a prison becomes invincible when the prisoner doesn't know he's inside. That's why observation is the first step toward freedom. It lights up the cell. And when the cell is lit, you see the door. And once you see the door, you can no longer pretend it isn't there. Observation transforms. It turns fear into information, anger into signal, pain into learning, thought into tool, emotion into message, reaction into choice, unconsciousness into clarity. And here lies the deepest revelation of this lesson. You can't change anything in your life until you can observe it without running from it. You can't overcome what you don't understand. You can't heal what you haven't seen. You can't master what you don't know. You can't free yourself from what you won't admit controls you. True inner work doesn't mean eliminating thoughts, but seeing them so clearly that they lose their hold on you. It's not about avoiding emotions, but understanding them so deeply that they no longer drag you. It's not about silencing the mind, but illuminating it. Because once the mind is illuminated, it no longer dominates it, cooperates. Huxley said, "The greatest journey of man is inward." And the Stoics said it even more simply, "Return to yourself." That return, that brutally honest inward gaze, is the bravest act there is. Because it strips you bare, because it reveals you, because it forces you to face yourself, but it also frees you. And that freedom has no equivalent in the outer world. What you don't observe controls you. What you observe begins to lose power. What you understand stops ruling you, and what you accept finally transforms. If something inside you felt a strange relief hearing these words, follow that impulse. That's your awareness waking up. Subscribing isn't a favor to this podcast, it's an act of respect for your own lucidity. It means you no longer want to live asleep, that you're ready to question what you once took for granted, to think with more clarity, to live with more intention. Do it now and share this message with someone who hasn't yet awakened. Because when one mind opens its eyes, it inevitably helps another to see. 7th Stoic lesson. The present is the only reality. Tomorrow is just a rumor. The human mind has a silent but devastating obsession: anticipation. It imagines, projects, predicts, invents scenarios, creates endings that don't exist, replays conversations that will never happen, builds futures that never arrive, or fears that never materialize. Human beings live more in what might happen than in what is happening. And that disconnection from the present moment is one of the deepest causes of modern suffering. Huxley saw it clearly. We live in a constant state of anticipation that prevents us from experiencing reality. The Stoics put it bluntly: the future is a story your mind tells you. The present is the only thing that truly exists. Tomorrow isn't a solid entity. It has no form, no guarantees, no substance. Tomorrow is a rumor built from your fears, desires, expectations, and assumptions. Tomorrow always promises some kind of salvation. When I achieve this, I'll be happy. When that happens, I'll finally have peace. When this person changes, I'll be fine. But tomorrow never arrives. When it does, it's already today. And since your mind was never trained to inhabit today, it escapes once again toward another tomorrow. It's a perpetual flight, a flight that keeps you from living. The Stoics taught that the present is the only moment where you have power. Not in a romantic sense, but a literal one. You can't act in the past, and you can't act in the future. You can only act here. Everything else is thought. Useful thought or destructive thought, but thought nonetheless. Unnecessary suffering begins when you confuse thought with reality, when you believe what you imagine is as real as what stands before you. But if you observe calmly, you'll notice something essential. Most of your distress doesn't belong to the present. It belongs to stories about the future. Huxley said that modern humans are so worried about tomorrow that they've forgotten how to live today. They move fast, talk fast, feel fast, think fast, but experience nothing deeply because their minds are always in mental transit toward what's next. Anxiety is nothing more than that inability to return. It's a mind wandering through imagined futures, interpreting them as threats, and the body, unable to distinguish thought from reality, reacts as if everything were imminent. The Stoics insisted on bringing attention back to what's immediate. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself every morning, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be one." It's a powerful reminder. Action exists in the present, not in speculation. The future is a possibility, not a certainty. And living, as if it were a certainty, is living in illusion. Why is it so hard to inhabit the present? Because although it's the only real space, it's also the only one that can't be manipulated. What you feel now is what is. What happens now is what is. In the present, you can't negotiate, invent, or escape. It's a naked, direct, honest place. In the present, you can't hide your inner state. That's why so many people seek refuge in the future, because the future is malleable. In imagination, you can control everything. In reality, you can't. Huxley believed that man fears the present because the present demands awareness. And awareness, when untrained, can be uncomfortable. It means seeing your life as it is, not as you wish it were. It means accepting your emotions without justification. It means stopping the postponement of your existence. It means ceasing to blame tomorrow for the lack of action today. The mind that lives in the future avoids that responsibility. It prefers to say, someday. It prefers to project the illusion of a life it's unwilling to create right now. The Stoics, on the other hand, trained themselves to live fully in the moment. Not because they ignored the future, but because they understood that the best way to influence it is by acting rightly today. Worry has never changed the future, action has. Anxiety has never solved a problem ahead of time, clarity has. A scattered mind has never built a life of excellence, a present mind has. The present is the only place where you can change your life. The present is the only place where you can feel peace. The present is the only place where you can decide. The present is the only place where you exist. Everything else is mental fiction. But don't mistake this for ignoring the future. The Stoics planned, reflected, and prepared. The difference is that they didn't live emotionally in tomorrow. They didn't deposit their well-being in what hadn't yet happened. They didn't hand their peace over to phantoms. They saw the future for what it is, a space of possibility, not a space of anxiety. Huxley claimed that modern man feels more comfortable imagining life than living it. He spends more time building scenarios in his head than experiencing what's in front of him. But life isn't lived in imagination, it's lived in reality. And reality exists only here, now, this moment. The mind that learns to return repeatedly to the present becomes stronger, clearer, calmer. Not because life gets easier, but because it stops multiplying suffering through anticipatory thought. It stops fighting with a future that doesn't exist. It stops mistaking possibilities for realities. And in releasing the rumor of tomorrow, it finally finds rest. The present demands courage. The future demands imagination. Anxiety is the result of confusing the two. The Stoic channels the mind back to the moment each time it wanders into stories. What is happening right now? What can I do right now? What depends on me right now? Everything else is noise. If you learn to live here, even when tomorrow brings difficulty, you'll face it stronger because you'll have built your strength in the only place that exists, this moment. Tomorrow is a rumor. The present is your reality. Live it before it passes you by unlived. 8th Stoic lesson: the value of intellectual silence. We live in a world that fears silence. Not physical silence, but intellectual silence, that inner space where there are no distractions, no conceptual noise, where the mind stops running and begins to reveal what it truly contains. Modern society has turned noise into a virtue, always informed, always opinionated, always consuming, always reacting, always processing stimuli. Huxley saw it as the perfect trap to keep the mind so busy that it never has time to look at itself. The Stoics understood this long before anyone else. A noisy mind is a weak mind, a silent mind is a powerful one. Intellectual silence isn't the absence of thought, it's the absence of chaos. It's not passivity, it's clarity. It's that strange, profound state in which the mind becomes a mirror, reflecting what is without distortion. Most people fear that mirror because it shows what the noise hides. In silence appear your oldest fears, your most rigid beliefs, your most painful contradictions, your most unconfessable desires. Noise distracts, silence reveals. Huxley said modern humans avoid silence not because it's boring, but because it's unbearable to those who don't know themselves. In silence, the stimuli that let you escape yourself disappear. The screens, the sounds, the conversations, the comparisons, the borrowed responsibilities all vanish. And what remains is your mind, your real mind. Not the socialized mind, not the performative mind, not the busy mind, the naked mind. And that intellectual nakedness is so uncomfortable for those who've never inhabited it that they'll do anything to run from it. The Stoics, on the other hand, deliberately sought silence, not to disconnect from the world, but to connect with themselves. For them, silence was the laboratory of reason. There they analyzed their impulses, reviewed their beliefs, organized their thoughts, examined their emotions. There they prepared for real life. Because clarity doesn't come from living outward, it comes from cultivating the inner world. And the inner world can only be heard when the noise fades. Think for a moment about the difference between a noisy mind and a silent one. A noisy mind reacts, a silent mind chooses. A noisy mind scatters, a silent mind discerns. A noisy mind exhausts, a silent mind strengthens. A noisy mind needs stimulation to feel alive. A silent mind feels alive simply by being present. This is the fundamental difference between living in confusion and living in consciousness. Huxley noted that intellectual noise has become a mechanism of social control. If you can keep people entertained, they will never stop to ask whether their lives have meaning. They will never reflect on their relationship with consumption, with desire, with comparison, with identity. They will never question the narrative they repeat each day. But when a person immerses themselves in silence, even for a few minutes, their mind begins to awaken. They start to see what once went unnoticed. They start to notice contradictions they once ignored. They begin to feel the gap between their inner and outer life. And that lucidity is dangerous to any system that depends on human automatism. The Stoics spoke of silence as an inner fortress, a fortress where emotions lose the power to drag you, where thoughts lose the power to dominate you, where judgment becomes sharp. Inside that fortress, everything aligns, everything gains perspective. What once seemed urgent stops being so. What once felt unbearable becomes manageable. What once seemed confusing becomes simple. Not because the situation changes, but because you change when you view it from stillness. Intellectual silence is also a form of honesty. Within it, you can't lie to yourself. You can't justify your decisions with empty reasoning. You can't fabricate explanations that sound good but aren't true. In silence, you see your real motivations, not the ones you show the world. You see your attachments, your weaknesses, your wounds, your genuine desires. And that vision, though uncomfortable, is the first step toward freedom. Because what is seen is understood, and what is understood loses the power to sabotage you from the shadows. Huxley believed silence wasn't a luxury, it was a necessity. A fundamental condition for thinking clearly in a world saturated with stimuli. The Stoics confirmed this through daily practice. They withdrew from noise so they could return stronger to the world. Not because silence isolated them, but because it prepared them. Whoever learns to listen to their mind without noise can listen to the world without being carried away by it. Intellectual silence also has an unexpected effect. It amplifies perception. Suddenly you notice details you used to miss. You see opportunities that once seemed invisible. You hear nuances in other people's words you'd never caught before. You sense your body with greater precision, your emotions with greater subtlety, your reason with greater firmness. Silence doesn't disconnect you, it refines you. It makes you more aware, sharper, more present. But perhaps the deepest revelation of silence is this: you are not your thoughts, you are the space in which they occur. When the noise disappears, you can see that the mind is a river, not an identity. Your thoughts are not you, your emotions are not you, your fears are not you. You are the consciousness that observes. And that consciousness is silent by nature. That's why intellectual silence is essential. It lets you experience your true identity without interference. Silence is not emptiness. It is clarity. It is strength. It is lucidity. It is freedom. The Stoics knew this. Huxley knew it. And anyone who spends even a few minutes in deep silence discovers it too. There, in that still, bare space, transformation begins. Ninth Stoic lesson: transcending the image others have of you. There's a prison where almost everyone lives without realizing it, the image others hold of you. A cell without bars, without guards, without visible chains. A prison built from expectations, judgments, glances, and opinions you never asked for yet, still allowed to shape how you breathe. Huxley condemned this social slavery harshly. The human being adapts so much to the image he believes others expect that he eventually forgets who he is when no one is watching. The Stoics, centuries earlier, had already diagnosed the same poison. Other people's opinions only have power if you choose to lend it to them. The image others have of you is not your identity. It's a reflection distorted by their insecurities, desires, and personal history. Every person sees you from their own labyrinth. Every judgment cast upon you is a shadow projected from their experience, and yet, almost automatically, you let those shadows become limits. You behave according to what you think they expect. You speak according to what you think sounds acceptable. You decide according to what you think will be approved. You live as though you were a character written by someone else. Huxley said, "Modern society doesn't need to control people by force. It only needs to convince them to be likable, to fit in, to be acceptable. Once that's done, no supervision is needed. People censor themselves, correct themselves, adjust themselves. Real social control begins when you fear disappointing the world more than disappointing yourself." The Stoics viewed it from a radically different angle. Virtue is your only identity. What others believe about you doesn't define you, your character does. What others say about you doesn't disturb you, your reaction does. What others expect from you doesn't bind you. You bind yourself when you try to satisfy expectations that don't belong to you. Marcus Aurelius was blunt. The opinion of others belongs to them, not to you. The wise man doesn't live to please the world, he lives to be consistent with himself. But why do we care so much about what others think? Because we seek validation, because we fear rejection, because we mistake acceptance for self-worth, because we were raised to believe that if others don't approve of us, something is wrong. Huxley broke it down clearly. The desire to fit in is a sophisticated form of fear. Fear of not being loved, of not being seen, of not being enough. And that fear makes you manipulable. It keeps you small. It makes you dependent on external signals to feel at peace. In that state, the image others have of you becomes your master, and you its servant. The Stoics had another vision of freedom. They knew emotional independence doesn't come when the world stops judging you. It comes when you stop obeying those judgments. True freedom begins when you understand this. You can't control what others think, but you can decide how much it affects you. The external world is impressions. The internal world is choice. The external is noise. The internal is reason. Other people's opinions are winds. You decide whether to be a leaf or a rock. When you live from your own judgment, something extraordinary happens. Your energy changes. You start speaking more calmly, acting more clearly, deciding more firmly. Not because you've become defiant, but because you've become authentic. The world might not understand you, but it no longer matters because you understand yourself. And when you understand yourself, you respect yourself. And when you respect yourself, you become unshakable. Huxley said that only when a person dares to be themselves, without asking permission, do they begin to awaken. They begin to see how many of their decisions were made to satisfy others rather than honor themselves. They begin to realize how much of their life has been lived under the shadow of "what will they say?" and how much freedom returns when that shadow fades. They discover that external judgment only hurts those who cling to it. Letting go of it is an act of spiritual maturity. The Stoics called this process right indifference. It isn't arrogance, disinterest, or isolation. It's the understanding that other people's opinions are information, not command. It's listening without submission. It's considering without losing yourself. It's recognizing that the value of your life isn't measured by applause but by coherence. And coherence is born when your decisions reflect your reason, not the echo of external voices. But transcending the dark image others have of you requires courage. Because in that process, you'll lose people who only loved you when you resembled what they needed. You'll lose instant validation. You'll lose certain social permissions. But what you gain is infinitely more valuable. You gain your life. You gain your authenticity. You gain your inner strength. You gain the ability to look at yourself without shame. You gain the freedom to act from your center. Huxley believed that most people never truly live until they dare to challenge the image others hold of them. But the Stoics went even further. They didn't just invite you to challenge that image, they invited you to transcend it. To live in an inner place where the opinions of others simply cannot enter. Where your judgment is sovereign, where your peace is sacred, where your identity is your virtue, not your reputation. When you learn to transcend that image, something within you unlocks. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop justifying and start acting. You stop seeking approval and start seeking truth. And that transition is one of the greatest internal revolutions a human being can experience. The image others have of you belongs to them. The truth of who you are belongs only to you. By freeing yourself from that image, you don't become distant, you become authentic. You don't become rebellious, you become free. You don't become misunderstood, you become whole, and those meant to be in your life will recognize you for it. 10th Stoic lesson: knowledge without transformation is deception. We live in an era obsessed with accumulating information. Books, courses, videos, motivational quotes, philosophical concepts, brilliant ideas, self-help theories, techniques, methods, explanations. Never before in human history has knowledge been so accessible, and yet never before has it been so difficult to turn it into something real. Huxley warned with brutal clarity, knowledge that doesn't change your life is mere intellectual entertainment. The Stoics were even harsher. Knowing and not acting is a form of ignorance in disguise. The modern mind confuses learning with becoming. It confuses information with transformation. It confuses understanding with applying. It confuses inspiration with discipline. It's easy to be moved by a powerful idea. It's hard to live it. It's easy to repeat profound phrases. It's hard to embody them in your behavior. It's easy to know what you should do. It's hard to do it when no one is watching. The distance between understanding and acting is the distance between theory and life itself. Huxley believed that most people seek knowledge not to free themselves, but to soothe their anxiety. They learn about spirituality but never know themselves. They learn about psychology but never observe their minds. They learn about the ego but still defend their image. They learn about meditation but never sit in silence. They learn about discipline but don't change a single habit. Knowledge becomes a mental refuge to avoid the real work transformation. The Stoics saw this with implacable clarity. For them, philosophy wasn't a discourse, it was a way of living. They didn't study to know more, they studied to be better. Wisdom was embodied action, the ability to apply principles even when it was uncomfortable, even when no one applauded, even when it hurt. Seneca put it bluntly, "It is not enough to learn wisdom, one must practice it." A principle not lived is a useless luxury. But why do we learn so much and change so little? Because knowledge is safe. Transformation is not. Knowledge demands no sacrifice. Transformation does. Knowledge keeps you comfortable. Transformation forces you to confront yourself. Huxley said that many people fall in love with ideas because ideas demand nothing of them. An idea doesn't require discipline. An idea doesn't ask you to rise early, to change your character, to face your shadows. An idea doesn't ask you to stop justifying your flaws. An idea makes you feel wise without having to be wise. It's the perfect illusion. The Stoics shattered that illusion with one brutal question. How are you living? Not, what do you know? Not, what have you read? Not, what have you understood? But how are you living? Because life responds to your actions, not to your speeches. Knowledge without action gives you a false sense of progress. You believe you're changing because you think about changing. You believe you're advancing because you understand what you should do. You believe you're evolving because you accumulate information. Yet you remain the same because your behavior hasn't changed. The mind deceives you into feeling virtuous simply for knowing virtue. Huxley held that real revolution occurs when knowledge descends from intellect into the body, when it stops being theory and becomes habit, when it stops being inspiration and becomes structure, when it stops being discourse and becomes moral choice, when what you know becomes what you do. The Stoics had a relentless practice, daily self-examination. Each night Marcus Aurelius reviewed his behavior with honesty, not his thoughts, not his intentions, his conduct. Was I coherent? Did I act with virtue? Did I let passion carry me? Did I behave as the man I wished to be? For him, thinking wasn't enough, only action could shape him. And here lies the uncomfortable truth. If your life doesn't change, your knowledge is useless. You can know every Stoic principle in existence and still be a slave to your emotions. You can quote Huxley in every conversation and still live from fear. You can talk of virtue and still act impulsively. Knowledge that is not embodied is smoke. But when a principle becomes flesh, something profound happens. When you practice discipline, discipline becomes part of your personality. When you choose silence, you learn to listen. When you choose virtue, you feel dignity. When you choose detachment, you regain freedom. When you choose temperance, you gain inner power. When you choose to act consciously, your mind stops ruling you. Huxley said that real transformation is not seen in your words, it's seen in your eyes. The Stoics would say, it's seen in your character, in how you respond, in how you feel, in how you decide, in how you behave when no one is watching. True wisdom is visible, it is not declared. Knowledge without transformation is deception. Knowledge with action is power. And only those who become what they learn truly awaken. 11th Stoic lesson. Unity with nature begins inner freedom. Modern humans live disconnected from the very thing that sustains them. They breathe without feeling the air, walk without touching the earth, look at the sky without truly seeing it, eat without tasting, and inhabit their bodies as if they were accessories. Huxley warned that this disconnection is the root of a superficial, anxious, and fragmented life. The Stoics understood this long before him. To live according to nature doesn't mean retreating to the forest. It means returning to your essence, to who you are when you strip away noise, ego, and the illusion of control. Nature isn't just trees, mountains, or seas. Nature is the universal order that sustains you, the silent law that governs cycles, time, change, birth, and death. It's the principle ensuring that everything has its moment, its purpose, and that nothing remains fixed. To live according to nature is to align yourself with what already is, instead of fighting against it with a mind that arrogantly believes it knows better than reality itself. Huxley said that man has become so arrogant he tries to impose his will even on processes he can't control. He wants to manage his emotions, dictate the rhythm of life, shape others' perceptions, halt the passage of time, delay death. Everything beyond his power is seen as a threat. But what threatens him isn't the world, it's his internal resistance to the inevitable. The Stoics taught that nature doesn't negotiate. Nature flows. Nature changes. Nature destroys to create. Nature gives and takes. It neither rewards nor punishes it, simply follows its course. Human suffering arises when your mind demands that life behave contrary to its nature, when you expect permanence where there is change, control where there is uncertainty, stability where there is movement, immortality where there is death. To live according to nature is to accept that universal law, not with resignation but with wisdom. It's ceasing to demand that life bend to your will and instead shaping your will to align with reality. Marcus Aurelius said serenity comes when you align your will with that of the cosmos, when you stop fighting the current and begin to walk with it. Not to surrender, but to act with clarity. Huxley affirmed that modern man doesn't suffer from what happens to him, but from the artificial interpretation he constructs around it. He suffers because he judges life through unnatural parameters, constant speed, extreme productivity, continuous stimulation, instant gratification, eternal stability. All of that contradicts nature. Life is not stable. Life is not linear. Life is not comfortable. Life is change, transition, cycles, renewal. The Stoics saw this truth everywhere. They observed a falling leaf and saw a lesson. They watched a storm and understood the flow of fate. They saw a seed breaking open to sprout and grasped the metaphor of human growth. To them, every element of nature was a reminder of who we are and how we should live with integrity, flexibility, humility, and acceptance. But unity with nature isn't only external, it's internal. Your emotions belong to nature too. Your sadness, anger, joy, fear, calm, they are all part of a natural emotional cycle that can't be fully controlled. Huxley said, "Man's mistake is his constant attempt to repress himself to fit an unnatural ideal of perfect strength or artificial positivity." The Stoics corrected this. You must not eliminate your emotions, you must understand them. They are as natural as dawn itself. When you accept the nature of your emotions, you stop fighting them. You stop blaming yourself for feeling. You stop trying to be a machine. You recognize that your inner life has its own seasons, summers of energy and expansion, winters of introspection, springs of rebirth, autumns of letting go. Resisting the emotional cycle is resisting your own nature. Unity with nature also means releasing the illusion of control. Huxley explained that humans try to dominate what isn't theirs, the decisions of others, the outcomes of their efforts, the course of destiny, the passage of time. But control is an illusion. The Stoics repeated it endlessly. You can control only your judgments, actions, and decisions. Everything else is nature moving by its own logic. And here lies the profound revelation. When you accept the nature of the world, the nature of your emotions, and the nature of change, you reclaim inner freedom. Because you no longer waste energy resisting the inevitable. Because you no longer exhaust your strength forcing what isn't yours to control. Because you no longer break yourself trying to stop what must flow. Huxley said that only when man stops resisting the river of life does he find peace. The Stoics said that this peace is not passivity but wisdom. It doesn't mean giving up action, it means acting from clarity. It doesn't mean accepting injustice, it means understanding that your power lies in your response, not in external events. Unity with nature turns you into someone who flows without losing themselves, who acts without anxiety, who feels without being carried away, who accepts without resignation, who lives without fear of change. And in that state, in that deep alignment with what is true, inner freedom begins. Not the superficial freedom of ego, but the luminous freedom of a mind that no longer fights the world because it has learned to move with it. 12th Stoic lesson. Death is part of life. Facing it is living fully. Most people live as if they were immortal, and it's precisely because of this that they suffer. Huxley saw it with brutal clarity. Human beings fear death so deeply that they numb themselves to avoid feeling the passage of time. They distract themselves, rush through life, stay busy, obsess, get tangled in meaningless dramas, all to avoid confronting the single truth that makes us all equal. You are going to die. But what Huxley discovered, and what the Stoics had taught for centuries, is that the fear of death is, in reality, the fear of living without meaning. Seneca said it with timeless simplicity. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. Within that sentence lies a silent revelation. We don't fear the end, we fear reaching it only to realize we've been spectators of our own lives. We fear realizing, too late, that we were never masters of our time, our choices, our deepest dreams. We fear looking back and seeing that we didn't live, we merely existed. Huxley observed how modern society, obsessed with entertainment, screens, and speed, avoids any deep reflection on life and death. We are taught to distract ourselves, not to understand, to consume, not to contemplate, to survive, not to transcend. We are so busy artificially extending the feeling of being alive that we forget to experience the reality of life already happening. The Stoics didn't avoid the topic, they embraced it. For them, death wasn't a tragedy, it was a compass. Not an enemy, but a strict and honest teacher. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself each morning, you could leave life right now. Not to live in fear, but to live with purpose. To remember, death memento mori was not a morbid obsession, it was a spiritual practice, a way to strip away the unnecessary, to focus the mind on what truly matters, to turn each day into an act of radical presence. Huxley said that death is the greatest teacher because it reveals the true scale of our worries. When you remember your finitude, problems shrink, the ego quiets, urgency fades, and something you'd forgotten begins to shine again, your humanity. Life becomes clearer when you understand it isn't guaranteed. The people you love glow brighter. Conversations gain weight. Calm becomes a priority. Authenticity becomes unavoidable. Because you no longer have time to waste on masks. The Stoics taught that to fear death is to fear nature itself. Everything dies. Trees, animals, stars, cities, empires, memories, even galaxies. Death is not a flaw in the system, it is part of its design. To deny it is to deny your place in the cosmos. To resist it is to resist reality, and no mind ever finds serenity by fighting the inevitable. Here lies the deepest paradox. He who fears death also fears life. He who accepts death lives for the first time. When you realize your days are finite, your mind undergoes a silent shift. You stop postponing. You stop waiting for the perfect moment. You stop chasing validation. You stop silencing what matters. You stop wasting energy on what won't matter when you take your final breath. You begin to live with sincerity, with intention, with a kind of intelligence that can't be taught, it can only awaken. Huxley said the key isn't to conquer death, but to reconcile with it. The Stoics added that reconciliation brings freedom, because only those who do not cling to life can truly enjoy it. Only those who are not afraid to lose everything can appreciate everything. Only those who accept that all things end can love without possession, give without fear, and move forward unchained. Death reminds us of both our greatness and our fragility. It shows us that we are but a moment. But that moment can contain the entire universe if we live it consciously. It teaches us that life is precious precisely because it isn't eternal. It invites us to stop chasing an artificial sense of security and to find instead the truth of the present moment. The Stoics repeated, "Do not die without having lived." Huxley would have translated it this way: wake up before it's too late. To accept death is not to abandon the desire to live it, is to abandon the fear of living poorly. It is to take responsibility for your existence. It is to stop running. It is to look directly into the mystery and, instead of trembling, say, "I am here to learn, to feel, to experience, to grow." When you take that stance, something extraordinary happens. Anxiety loses its grip. Worry diminishes. The mind grows lighter. The heart expands. Life regains meaning. And death becomes a gentle reminder, not a threat. Stoic wisdom and Huxley's vision converge at the same core truth. Real life begins when you accept that it will end. There is no philosophy more liberating, no truth more necessary, in a world asleep running from the only certainty that could awaken it. And here you are, reading these words, breathing, feeling, aware that each day brings you closer to your end. The question isn't if you will die, that's already decided. The question is, will you live before it happens? Open your eyes before life does it for you. There are moments in life that don't warn you. Moments that pull the ground from beneath your feet, that shatter your certainties, that confront you with the rawness of existence. They don't come to punish you, they come to wake you up. And though they hurt, though they break, though they may seem unfair, all of them point to a truth we've learned to avoid with almost perfect skill. You are not living as consciously as you think. You've spent years reacting without thinking, repeating ideas that aren't yours, obeying habits you never chose, running from emotions you never understood, accepting routines that don't nourish you, and carrying fears you've never questioned. You've survived out of inertia, out of habit, out of comfort, out of fear, believing there will be time, believing the moment will come, believing tomorrow will be different. But tomorrow will only be different if you are. This script was never meant to give you easy answers or instant solutions. It wasn't meant to entertain you. It wasn't meant to fill you with pretty words. It aimed for something more demanding, to unsettle you, to shake you, to show you the mirror you've been avoiding for far too long. Because discomfort is the threshold of transformation, and no deep life is born from a mind that refuses to look at itself. Every lesson you've heard, from the trap of comfort to the acceptance of death, has pointed to the same place. You, to who you are when no one's watching, to what you think when you're not distracting yourself, to what you feel when you lower your guard, to what you decide when you're alone with your truth. That's you. The rest is noise. Huxley said that true slavery begins when we accept the world without thinking. The Stoics added that true freedom begins when you think without accepting everything your mind tells you. Between those two ideas lies your life, the responsibility to awaken and the duty to master your inner world. That is the only revolution that matters. You've feared too many things: rejection, failure, the opinion of others, uncertainty, pain, loneliness. But what you should truly fear, if you still need to fear something, is this: reaching the end of your life and realizing you were never truly alive. That most of your days were copies of the one before. That you never dared to think for yourself. That your choices were born from fear, not clarity. That your dreams kept waiting for your character to catch up. That you were a spectator, not a protagonist. That you waited too long. That you got distracted too easily. That you stayed silent too often. That you settled for too little. That you let pass what will never return. Because life has limits, but unconsciousness doesn't. And if you don't wake up now, you could spend decades believing you're alive while existence slips through your fingers like water. Each lesson you've heard here isn't theory. It's a bridge, a call, a knock at the door of your consciousness, an invitation to look inward with courage and outward with clarity, to question what you accept without thinking, to challenge what comforts you, to release what numbs you, to face what hurts, to observe what you've refused to see. That is adult life, the conscious life, the life that chooses, the life that awakens. And now that you've reached the end, I want to leave you with something you cannot ignore. This may be the last time you hear something like this before you fall asleep again. Because the mind's sleep is powerful, because routine pulls you back, because habit numbs, because old patterns know how to wait. If you don't take this moment of clarity and turn it into action today, you will lose it tomorrow. And you'll return to the mold, to the noise, to yourself, but to the version that no longer serves you. The Stoics said that freedom begins when you become master of your mind. Huxley said that awakening begins when you question every belief that holds you up. I say to you now, the life you seek begins when you finally decide to stop being a victim of your own thoughts. There is no fate more tragic than dying as the smallest version of yourself. There is no fate greater than, at last, awakening. So ask yourself, without softening, without lying, without excuses, are you living or merely existing? Are you choosing or just reacting? Are you awake or just moving through life with your eyes closed? Are you thinking for yourself or does your mind think for you? Are you living like someone who knows they will die or like someone who believes they have infinite time? Life doesn't wait. The mind doesn't calm itself. Transformation doesn't come from inspiration. It comes from decision. And that decision only you can make. Open your eyes now, before life does it for you. Your voice is essential here. Every reflection strengthens and elevates our community, reflecting the true value of each individual and contributing to our shared Stoic identity. The reflection that receives the most support will be set as the standard of this community of Stoic minds, a community that does not flee from pain but walks through it with courage, with wisdom, with honor. We will see each other in our next gathering at Stoicism for Winners, where we will continue exploring the riches of Stoic wisdom applied to modern life. Now, take the opportunity to deepen your Stoic practice with new recommended podcast sessions. Follow us so you don't miss any reflection that could help you at just the moment when everything feels overwhelming. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we publish episodes designed to accompany you when life feels heavy, when it's hard to stay calm, when you need a word to remind you who you are. Not following us is to risk missing exactly that lesson that could bring back the peace you have been seeking. Until we meet again, remember, you are the sole owner of your perception, the creator of your peace, and the warrior of your own battle. This is the legacy of Stoicism, the art of being invincible.